The 4th of July has always been my favorite holiday. The bright, colorful fireworks lighting up the night sky, the scent of freshly grilled burgers and hot dogs wafting through the air, and the sense of unity and celebration that brings the whole town together. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the Independence Day celebration was a big deal. Everyone gathered in the town square for the parade. The local bands played patriotic tunes, and the day culminated in a grand fireworks display by the lake. This year, I was particularly excited because I was finally old enough to hang out with my friends without parental supervision. We had planned to meet at the lake around dusk to get a good spot for the fireworks. As I walked through the bustling streets, I saw familiar faces everywhere. The excitement was palpable, with everyone donning their red, white, and blue attire. Children ran around with sparklers, their laughter adding to the festive atmosphere. The local vendors had set up stalls selling all sorts of treats, from cotton candy to ice cream. As the sun began to set, I noticed a food truck that I hadn't seen before, parked near the edge of the festivities. It was an old, weathered vehicle with faded paint and a sign that read Old Joe's Best Burgers and Dogs. The line in front of the truck was unusually long, and the tantalizing aroma of grilled meat drew me closer. My friends and I decided to give it a try before finding our spot by the lake. The truck seemed out of place among the more polished stalls, but the smell of the food was irresistible. We waited in line, chatting about our plans for the summer and the upcoming high school year. As we inched closer to the front, I couldn't help but notice the truck's peculiar decorations. The exterior was adorned with old, faded photos of previous celebrations, each one featuring smiling children holding burgers and hot dogs. The photos looked strangely dated, as if they had been taken decades ago. Despite the odd feeling gnawing at me, my hunger won out. Old Joe, the owner and sole operator of the food truck, was a peculiar man. He had a permanent smile plastered on his face, almost as if it were carved into his features. His eyes, however, were cold and uninviting, a stark contrast to his friendly demeanor. He wore an old-fashioned paper hat and a grease-stained apron, which added to his unsettling appearance. His movements were methodical and precise, flipping burgers and assembling hot dogs with an eerie calmness. Despite the eerie vibe, the food was undeniably delicious. We all agreed that these were the best burgers and hot dogs we had ever tasted. As we sat down to eat, I overheard some older kids talking about how the food truck only appeared once a year, always on the 4th of July. They mentioned something about the truck's mysterious nature and how it was linked to the town's annual spike in missing person cases, mostly children. A chill ran down my spine as I listened to their stories. The idea seemed far-fetched, but the coincidence was hard to ignore. I looked around at the other patrons of the food truck. They all seemed oblivious to the sinister rumors, enjoying their meals without a care in the world. My friends and I debated whether there was any truth to the stories, but the general consensus was that it was just an urban legend. Still, the uneasy feeling lingered in the back of my mind. I couldn't shake the image of Old Joe's unnerving smile and the way his eyes seemed to follow us as we walked away. As the night progressed, the fireworks display began. My friends and I were entranced by the dazzling lights and deafening booms, momentarily forgetting about the unsettling tales we had heard earlier. The sky was a canvas of vibrant colors, each explosion met with gasps and applause from the crowd. We found a perfect spot near the lake, spreading out our blankets and settling in for the show. The atmosphere was electric, and for a while, everything felt perfect. Suddenly, amidst the crowd's cheers and the fireworks explosions, I realized one of my friends, Timmy, was missing. Panic set in as we searched the area, calling his name. At first, we thought he might have wandered off to get more food or use the restroom, but as the minutes ticked by with no sign of him, our concern grew. We split up, each of us scouring different parts of the festival grounds, but Timmy was nowhere to be found. We quickly alerted the adults and the police, but Timmy was nowhere to be found. My mind raced back to the stories about the food truck. Could it be connected to Timmy's disappearance? The thought seemed absurd, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The police asked us a series of questions, but we had no answers. As the night wore on, the mood of the celebration shifted from festive to tense. The following day, search parties were organized, and the entire community came together to look for Timmy. Flyers with his picture were posted all over town, and the local news stations covered his disappearance extensively. Despite the widespread efforts, there was no trace of him. The fear that gripped our town was palpable, and parents began to keep their children close, fearing that they might be next. The joy of the 4th of July had been replaced with a growing sense of dread. Over the next few days, the entire town was on edge. More children had gone missing, and the community was gripped by fear. I couldn't stop thinking about old Joe and his sinister food truck. Determined to find out the truth, I started my own investigation. I began by talking to the older kids who had mentioned the food truck's connection to the disappearances. They told me about rumors that had circulated for years, stories passed down from one generation of kids to the next. I scoured the town's archives and old newspapers, looking for any information on the mysterious food truck. To my horror, I discovered that the disappearances coincided with the food truck's annual visit every 4th of July for the past 20 years. The missing children were never found, and the cases remained unsolved. I found old articles describing the anguish of parents who had lost their children, their faces etched with sorrow in the grainy black and white photos. I spoke to some of the older residents of the town, hoping they might have more information. Many of them recalled the food truck from their own childhoods, but none of them seemed to remember anything particularly unusual about it. It was as if the truck had always been there, a fixture of the 4th of July celebrations. The more I dug, the more I felt like I was chasing shadows. Yet the pattern was too clear to ignore. Every year children went missing, and every year the food truck was there. Desperate for answers, I decided to follow the truck on the night of July 3rd, hoping to catch old Joe in the act. I knew it was dangerous, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing while more children vanished. Armed with a flashlight and a camera, I set out under the cover of darkness, determined to uncover the truth. My heart pounded as I approached the truck, parked in its usual spot on the outskirts of town. I decided to stake out the food truck the following evening. As I watched from a hidden spot, I saw old Joe loading supplies into his truck. He moved with an eerie precision, and his permanent smile never wavered. My heart pounded in my chest as I crept closer, trying to get a better look. The darkness provided some cover, but I had to be careful not to make any noise that might alert him to my presence. Peering through a small window at the back of the truck, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Inside, there were large, industrial-sized freezers and a table with what appeared to be butcher's tools. The most horrifying sight was the stacks of meat, some of which had clothing scraps and personal belongings mixed in. It didn't take long for me to realize the horrifying truth. The secret ingredient in Old Joe's famous burgers and hot dogs was human flesh. I felt bile rise in my throat as I stumbled back from the truck, trying to process what I had just seen. I knew I had to alert the authorities, but I also knew that Old Joe couldn't see me. I took a deep breath and quietly made my way to the nearest police station. As I walked, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting Old Joe to appear out of the shadows. Every sound made me jump, and my mind was a whirlwind of fear and revulsion. When I arrived at the police station, I told them everything I had discovered, and though they were skeptical at first, the evidence I presented was undeniable. The officers listened in stunned silence as I described the contents of the truck. They quickly organized a raid, and I was asked to guide them to the location. The ride back to the truck was tense, the air heavy with anticipation and dread. The police raided the food truck that night, and Old Joe was arrested. The horrifying discovery inside the truck shocked the entire town. The missing children's families were devastated, but at least they finally had some closure. The media descended on our small town, and the story made headlines nationwide. Reporters swarmed the streets, interviewing anyone who had a connection to the case. The once quiet town became a media circus overnight. Old Joe was convicted of multiple counts of murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The town slowly began to heal, but the scars of that 4th of July would never fade. The annual celebration was forever changed, and the once beloved tradition now carried a dark shadow. The parade, the fireworks, even the smell of grilled food. All these things now served as reminders of the horror that had been uncovered. The community came together in the aftermath, holding vigils for the lost children and supporting their grieving families. Memorials were erected in the town square, and each year, the 4th of July was marked by a somber remembrance ceremony. The joy of the holiday was tempered by the collective memory of what had happened, and it took years for the townsfolk to feel any semblance of normalcy again. As for me, I couldn't shake the nightmares that haunted my sleep. The image of Old Joe's permanent smile and the grisly sight inside his food truck were burned into my memory. I had survived, but I knew I would never be the same. The experience had changed me, making me more cautious and aware of the darkness that can lurk behind even the most innocent facades. I struggled with guilt, wondering if there was more I could have done to prevent the tragedies that had occurred. I began to see a therapist to help cope with the trauma. Talking about my experiences and hearing other survivors' stories slowly helped me process the events. My friends and I grew closer, bonded by the shared ordeal. We supported each other through the difficult times, our friendship strengthened by the adversity we had faced together. Years later, as I walked through a different town on the 4th of July, I couldn't help but notice a familiar, weathered food truck parked at the edge of the festivities. The sign read Old Joe's Best Burgers and Dogs, and a chill ran down my spine. Old Joe was behind bars, but his legacy lived on. It seemed that the horror of that fateful 4th of July was not confined to my hometown. How could it be possible? Was there another Old Joe, or had the original somehow escaped? The police were called, and the food truck was investigated, but this time nothing was found. No evidence of foul play, no missing children. Yet the sinister aura remained. It was as if the truck itself was cursed, carrying with it the echoes of the past, ready to strike fear into the hearts of unsuspecting townsfolk once more. The locals dismissed it as a prank or a coincidence, but I knew better. I stayed in the new town for a few days, keeping a close eye on the food truck. Each night, I watched from a distance, hoping to uncover any sign of foul play. The truck operated as usual, serving up its popular burgers and hot dogs to eager customers. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I spoke to some of the townspeople, warning them about the truck's dark history, but most of them laughed it off. As the days passed without incident, I began to doubt myself. Maybe it was just a coincidence. Maybe the horrors of the past were finally behind us. But on the evening of July 3rd, something happened that confirmed my worst fears. A young girl went missing, her parents frantically searching the festival grounds. The eerie similarities to the events in my hometown were undeniable. I immediately contacted the local authorities, sharing my suspicions and the history of Old Joe's food truck. This time, they took me seriously. The police launched a full investigation, and the food truck was once again searched. Hidden compartments and secret storage areas revealed the horrifying truth. Old Joe's recipe had indeed been passed down, and his successor had continued the gruesome tradition. The new owner was arrested, and the town was once again plunged into shock and grief. The missing girl was found alive, thankfully, but the revelation of what had been happening shook the community to its core. News of the arrest spread quickly, and the media once again descended upon the small town. Reporters linked the new case to the old, and the story of Old Joe's food truck became infamous nationwide. As I left the town, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The food truck had been stopped, but the darkness that surrounded it seemed to linger. Would it resurface somewhere else with a new owner and a new set of victims? The thought haunted me, a chilling reminder that some evils never truly die. In the years that followed, I dedicated myself to raising awareness about the dangers lurking behind seemingly innocent facades. I traveled to different towns, sharing my story and warning others about the sinister food truck. I collaborated with law enforcement and child protection agencies, helping to develop better strategies for preventing such horrors from happening again. Despite my efforts, I knew that the legacy of Old Joe's food truck was not something that could be easily erased. The horror that had been uncovered was a stark reminder of the darkness that can exist in the most unexpected places. The tale of the cursed food truck became a cautionary story, a warning to always be vigilant and never take safety for granted. Every 4th of July, as the fireworks lit up the night sky, I remembered the children who had been lost and the terror that had once gripped my hometown. The celebration was forever changed for me, a bittersweet mix of joy and sorrow. I had survived the nightmare, but I knew that the fight against such evil was never truly over. The 4th of July had always been a day of celebration for me, a time to bask in the glow of fireworks, enjoy barbecues with friends, and revel in the patriotic spirit that swept across the nation. Growing up in Washington, D.C., the heart of American history and politics, the Independence Day festivities were particularly grand. The National Mall would be thronged with people, all eager to witness the spectacular display of fireworks over the monuments. This year, however, something felt different. There was an underlying tension that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Perhaps it was the recent news of political unrest and the eerily coincidental spike in violence that had marked the lead-up to this year's celebrations. Rumors of a cursed legacy and whispered tales of dark secrets floated through the air like the smoke from the barbecue pits. I decided to join my friends at a popular spot near the Lincoln Memorial. We arrived early to secure a good view of the fireworks, laying out our blankets and setting up our coolers. As the day wore on, the crowd grew thicker, the air filled with laughter, the scent of grilling meat, and the occasional cheer from children playing nearby. Despite the festive atmosphere, I couldn't shake the sense of unease that had been growing within me. As dusk approached, I wandered off to grab some food from a nearby vendor. The line was long, and as I waited, I overheard snippets of conversations around me. People were discussing the history of the holiday, the recent uptick in violence, and the bizarre pattern of presidential deaths that had occurred over the years. It was then that I heard someone mention a curse, a sinister force that seemed to target the country's leaders during the Independence Day celebrations. Intrigued and unnerved, I returned to my friends, my mind racing with the possibilities. Could there really be a curse linked to the 4th of July? I decided to dig deeper into the history, starting with the library the next day. The sun had set by the time I rejoined my friends, and the fireworks show began, momentarily distracting me from the dark thoughts swirling in my mind. The sky was ablaze with colors, the booms and cracks echoing across the city. Yet, amidst the dazzling display, I felt a growing sense of dread. The following morning, I visited the Library of Congress, a majestic building filled with countless volumes of the nation's history. I combed through archives and old newspapers, piecing together a timeline of strange occurrences and untimely deaths linked to the holiday. I discovered that several presidents had died under mysterious circumstances around the 4th of July. Most notably, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams both died on July 4, 1826, and James Monroe died on July 4, 1831. The coincidences were unsettling, but there was little concrete evidence to suggest a curse. As I delved deeper, I stumbled upon accounts of an ancient secret society, one that allegedly wielded great influence and power. The society, known as the Order of the Silent Star, was rumored to be behind many historical events, manipulating them to serve their own dark purposes. The more I read, the more I became convinced that there was something sinister at play. The order was said to have a particular interest in the nation's leadership, ensuring that their influence remained strong by eliminating those who threatened their control. Determined to uncover the truth, I continued my research, focusing on any connections between the Order of the Silent Star and the presidential deaths. I found references to a series of ancient texts and artifacts that were said to hold the key to understanding the society's power. According to the accounts, these items were hidden in various locations around the country, protected by loyal members of the order. My investigation led me to a small, out-of-the-way antique shop in Georgetown, a place known for its rare and obscure collections. The shop's owner, an elderly man with a wealth of knowledge about the city's history, seemed to recognize the significance of my inquiries. He reluctantly revealed that he had come across several artifacts linked to the order, but he warned me that pursuing this path could be dangerous. Ignoring his caution, I persuaded him to show me the artifacts. He led me to a dimly lit back room filled with dusty relics and ancient tomes. Among them was a weathered journal that detailed the activities of the order throughout the years. The journal contained chilling accounts of rituals, assassinations, and the manipulation of political events, all orchestrated to maintain the society's grip on power. While the journal was old and fragile, its contents were unmistakably clear. As I pored over the journal, a sense of dread settled over me. The Order of the Silent Star was not just a shadowy group from the past. It was still active, and its influence continued to shape the nation's future. The realization that I was delving into something much larger and more dangerous than I had anticipated was overwhelming. I decided to leave the shop, my mind reeling with the implications of what I had discovered. In the days that followed, I began to notice strange occurrences. I felt as if I was being watched, and I received anonymous phone calls with no one on the other end. My apartment was broken into, though nothing seemed to be missing. The sense of unease that had begun on the 4th of July had now grown into full-blown paranoia. I knew I was being targeted, but I couldn't turn back now. I had to see this through, no matter the cost. I decided to reach out to others who might have had similar experiences. Through online forums and local historians, I connected with individuals who had also encountered the order's influence. Their stories were eerily similar: mysterious deaths, disappearances, and a pervasive sense of fear. We formed a small group, determined to expose the truth and bring an end to the order's reign of terror. One night, as I was going through my notes, I noticed a symbol that kept appearing in the journal and other documents related to the order. It was a star with an eye at its center, often accompanied by cryptic messages. I realized that this symbol was the mark of the order, a sign of their presence and power. The more I studied it, the more I understood that it was not just a logo but a warning. The next step was to find out where the order was currently operating. Our research pointed us to an old mansion on the outskirts of the city, a place that had long been rumored to be haunted. The mansion had a dark history, with many accounts of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. We decided to investigate, hoping to find concrete evidence that could bring down the order once and for all. The mansion was an imposing structure, its once grand facade now crumbling and overgrown with ivy. We approached it cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The air was thick with tension, and every creak of the floorboards set our nerves on edge. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of dusty hallways and decaying rooms, each one filled with relics of a bygone era. As we explored, we found more evidence of the Order's presence. Hidden rooms, secret passageways, and ancient artifacts all pointed to the mansion being a headquarters of sorts. The symbol of the star and eye was everywhere, etched into walls and furniture. It became clear that this place was more than just a meeting point. It was a shrine to their dark history. In one of the rooms, we discovered a collection of documents that detailed the Order's plans and activities. The papers were filled with names, dates, and cryptic instructions, all pointing to a coordinated effort to influence and control the nation's leadership. We also found a series of photographs showing members of the Order with various political figures, further confirming their reach and power. As we continued to search the mansion, we came across a hidden staircase leading down to a basement. The air grew colder as we descended, and the sense of foreboding was almost palpable. At the bottom of the stairs, we found a large chamber filled with more artifacts and documents. In the center of the room was an altar, adorned with the symbol of the star and eye. It was clear that this was a place of great significance to the Order. While we were examining the chamber, we heard footsteps above us. Panic set in as we realized that we were not alone. The footsteps grew louder, and soon we were confronted by a group of hooded figures. They were members of the Order, and their leader, a tall man with piercing eyes, stepped forward. He introduced himself as the Grand Master and explained that we had stumbled upon their most sacred place. The Grand Master told us that the Order had existed for centuries, guiding and shaping the course of history. They believed that their actions were necessary to maintain balance and order in the world. He warned us that our discovery would not be taken lightly, and that we would face severe consequences if we continued to pursue the truth. Despite his threats, we stood our ground. We knew that we had to expose the Order and bring an end to their reign of terror. The Grand Master, sensing our determination, ordered his followers to seize us. A struggle ensued, and in the chaos we managed to escape, but not without injuries. We fled the mansion, clutching the documents we had found, knowing that they were our only hope of bringing the Order to justice. We went into hiding, sharing our findings with trusted contacts and preparing to go public with the information. As we pieced together the documents, a horrifying pattern emerged. The Order had been behind numerous assassinations, political manipulations, and other dark deeds throughout history. Their influence was vast, reaching into every corner of the government and beyond. With the evidence in hand, we approached the media and law enforcement. The story made headlines, and an investigation was launched. The mansion was raided, and many members of the Order were arrested. The Grand Master, however, remained elusive, his whereabouts unknown. The public was shocked by the revelations, and calls for justice grew louder. Despite the arrests, we knew that the Order was not truly defeated. Their influence ran too deep, and there were still many loyal members at large. We continued to work with authorities, helping to uncover more of their operations and bring them to light. The fight was far from over, but we had struck a significant blow against the darkness that had plagued our nation for so long. Years later, as I reflected on the events that had transpired, I realized that the battle against the Order of the Silent Star was ongoing. The curse that had claimed the lives of so many presidents was not just a myth. It was a manifestation of the society's ruthless pursuit of power. The Order's influence had waned, but it was not gone entirely. They would likely resurface, their dark legacy continuing to haunt the nation. As for me, I had found a new purpose. I dedicated my life to uncovering hidden truths and exposing the forces that sought to manipulate and control. The memory of that fateful 4th of July and the horrors we had uncovered served as a constant reminder of the importance of vigilance and the fight against evil. Every year, as the fireworks lit up the night sky, I remembered the sacrifices made and the battles fought. The celebration of Independence Day had taken on a new meaning for me, a reminder of the ongoing struggle for freedom and justice in the face of darkness. The story of the Order of the Silent Star became a cautionary tale, a warning to future generations to remain vigilant and never take their freedoms for granted. Thank you for watching our stories about Independence Day. Did you enjoy it? Will you go see the fireworks in the 4th of July? We'd love to know what you think about these stories in the comments below. If you want more stories based on real-life events or fictionals, click on the video appearing on your screen now, or you can check the other horror stories playlist right there. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling tales. See you in the next video.